Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Frankly Speaking Sports. What an unbelievable week one. We thought college football week one was incredible. Oh my goodness. Talk about games in the NFL. How special is special teams? We've talked about this over and over again. They say defense wins championships. They say, other things win championships, but at the end of the day, you can add special teams to this category. How many playoff games, how many Super Bowls have you seen won and lost on whether a field goal is made or a field goal is not made, whether a snap is made correctly or a snap is not made correctly on a field goal? Lots and lots of them. Well, nothing was different yesterday, baby. Nothing in a game that the Carolina Panthers were expected to win. And some people expected them to win big. Not so fast. Just because Cleveland doesn't have Deshaun Watson doesn't mean that the quarterback position doesn't have a great supporting cast. What is my great honor, thrill, and pleasure to introduce to you is going to be a special guest for us tonight, and how honored we are to have the owner of Tobacco Road Sports Radio, host of Believe in Carolina Panthers podcast, and he's also a Sports Illustrated contributor, amongst many other things he does with high school sports. It's the #1 station, folks, in the triad, TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. Let's welcome in the great Desmond Johnson. Desmond, how you doing tonight, buddy?
Hey, brother, what's going on, man? I need to start taking you around with me to be my hype man. That was pretty good intro. I like that. That was
awesome. I've been practicing. I had some practice in my time doing this. Desmond, you know what? There's always surprises in week one. And yesterday was no different in the Carolina area than it was in other areas. Pittsburgh beating Cincinnati on one of the weirdest games I think I've watched in recent times. But, talk about, as much as it isn't what I say to people that I've talked to in the Carolina area last night after that game, I wouldn't call it by any means a season-ending loss for the Carolina Panthers. We're talking game one, but talk about how heartbreaking of a season-opening loss that was for the Panthers and the new staff they have under Coach Rule.
Well, it was pretty heartbreaking in terms of the way it happened, that final minute of the fourth quarter. I see people saying, the Panthers lost that game not because of the end, but because they allowed, over 200 yards rushing on the ground, and the offensive line of the Browns established a mood early in the game. All that is true. But the fact that Carolina was able to score 17 points in the fourth quarter, answer back, and actually take a 1-point lead with a minute to go, in my opinion, negates everything that happened before that. Like, you can say Carolina lost because this, that, and the third if they were down a couple of scores or never took the lead. But the fact that they took the lead after all that happened tells me that's not what lost in the game. What lost in the game was the sequence of events that happened in the final minute and minute and 8 seconds after they scored that field goal. And, Monday morning quarterback, we can nitpick about did the Panthers play too conservatively on that last drive? Should they have tried to go for the touchdown? Maybe they try to throw it, something like that. But in the end, everything they were trying to do would have worked if a couple of things hadn't happened, unfortunately, involving the referees. And I'm one of the type of people where I rarely blame a referee for dictating a game. But in this instance, there were two specific situations on the Browns' final drive that really dictated the outcome of this football game.
Yeah, and I'm not going to disagree with you, but I'm going to pick at you a little bit here because you're right. I saw those calls. Some people can argue that they breathed too hard when they were hitting the quarterback or something.
Brian Burns threw the left tackle into the quarterback, pretty much.
Yeah,
grew up in the passer.
Yeah, it was incredible. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, and once again, it's my opinion, they should have never got to that point. They should have never got to that point. And I want to talk about, I don't know what was happening because the game where I wasn't on TV, so I'm following it while I'm watching the Cincinnati-Pittsburgh game. And I'm like, oh, my goodness. Did McCaffrey get hurt? What's going on? I see 3 carries. What do you get? 9 rushes, 9 yards in the first half. So once again, I have to question, and we did this last year under a different OC, the play calling early in this game of offensive coordinator Ben McAdoo. And was it his decision? Was it Rule's decision? But at the end of the day, whoever the heck's decision it was obviously your best player on the field not being utilized. That's like Tom Brady not quarterbacking in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, that actually, I just spotlighted some of that. We just finished taping our reaction episode of the Believe in Carolina Panthers podcast that you can find on the Believe Podcast Network. It's myself, Sports Illustrated, Skylar Callahan, and former Panther running back great Jonathan Stewart. And I brought that up. I was like, I was texting with Stu during the game. In the first half, it was like they forgot Christian McCaffrey was actually in uniform and available to play. Like they just didn't. It was like they just didn't try to run the ball, period. And you can see it in the stats here. Carolina only rushed for, I think, like 54 yards or something like that total in this entire game. Cleveland rushed for 217. Incredible. So, that's in the nutshell. Cleveland came in knowing what their identity was. They are a run football team. They're going to win with defense. They're not going to make Jacoby Brissett go out and try to win the game for them. If you look at the stats, that's exactly what they did. I don't know what the identity is for Carolina. Matt Rule keeps saying he wants to be a run-first, tough-nosed, defensive-minded type of football team. And then every week they go out and they do something to contradict what he's saying that he wants their identity to be. Baker Mayfield threw 16 for 27, 235, a touchdown, an interception. He got sacked 4 times. He was under duress the entire game. You've got rookie Ike Ekwonu trying to guard Myles Garrett pretty much one-on-one for the entire game. And Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney were just having a party in the backfield all day. And it took them a half to realize Baker doesn't have enough time to throw the football. Oh, look, we've got Christian McCaffrey. Why don't we hand him the ball a little bit and see what happens? Every time Christian McCaffrey touched the ball Sunday, something good happened. And it finally
you know what, Des?
To figure that out.
Yeah, I want to just interrupt 1 second, but there was something in this game that I noticed, and I don't know if you noticed it too, that was different from last year with this coaching staff. They went into the locker room, and guess what they did? They made adjustments.
Yes.
Last year, it was the opposite. They would go into the locker room, come out, and do the same darn things. And what did you see? McCaffrey started touching the ball. It opened up more of Baker Mayfield's passing game because now it wasn't predictable what they were going to do. And yet this team then did come back. So when you look at this team and people want to know, why was it so important to get such an educated, mature NFL coaching staff? These are the reasons. Now, they didn't win the game, but darn it, they did have a chance to win it if that field goal's made. We can argue the point all day long. The first half, they didn't do it. The second half, they came out, made adjustments. They had a chance to win. They had a chance to win, and they lost. Not that you want to be happy with losing, but, a 47-yard field goal in the NFL is a highly makeable kick by a kicker.
Well, this kick was longer. This was a 58-yard field goal that the dude kicked. And,
no, I'm talking about, 58 yards.
Yeah, 58 yards is very, like I just said this a minute ago on the Believe podcast. For those that sit on their couch and watch NFL football and they yell when a kicker misses a kick, 58 yards is a very long kick. It's only a couple yards short of the actual record for the longest kick. For a rookie to come out on the road and kick that field goal to win the game, I can't really be mad at that. Like, that's between that and what happened. Let's look at the sequence of events that happened after we kicked our field goal to go up 1 point. So first things first, our kicker kicks the ball out of bounds on the kickoff. So that puts the Browns on the 40-yard line. They're 40 to start this off. So they only really need to get about 40 yards to get in field goal position, right? So we're playing defense. We're doing our thing. We're harassing Jacoby Brissett. He's trying to get the ball down the field. We get the rough in the passer call on Brian Burns. So they get another 15 yards on top of that. That was on a first down, so they gave him a new set of downs automatically. The thing that the Panthers are kind of hung up on, besides the rough and the passer penalty that got called, was the next penalty that got called, which was did not get called, which was the fake spike, where clearly Jacoby Brissett stands up. Jonathan Stewart just mentioned this. It looked like he was about to throw a smoke route. He got up and looked like he was about to go throw a smoke route. thought against it or realized he wasn't supposed to do it and spiked the football. That is illegal. You can't do that. That you can't fake a play and then spike it. You have to intently spike the football, or you're trying to psych out the defense.
Right.
It's an illegal play. It's written verbatim in the rule book, which is why all the flags came out. Matt Rule's got his hands in the air. Hey, this is a penalty. It's intentional grounding. And they all inexplicably pick up the flag and say there's no penalty on the play. So because of that, instead of getting what should have happened, which would have been a loss of down and a 10-second runoff, and they would not have been in field goal. Sorry.
Hey, it happens. You're fired up.
They wouldn't have been in field goal position because of it too. The Panthers would have won this game. So all the second guessing about should they have went for a touchdown? Did they leave too much time on the clock? They actually did it the way they were supposed to do it. They just didn't account for the referees going to rough in the passer penalty and then not calling a clear fake spike situation, intentional grounding that would have changed the outcome of the game. So I can't really be mad at the Panthers. They did show me, like you said, Larry, last year it would be in reverse. They'd come out looking really good first quarter, second quarter. They'd come out in the third quarter and didn't change anything. The other team had adjusted, and then you would watch the Panthers lose a game. Like they would kind of let it slip away and wouldn't adjust. Yesterday, they came out flat. They picked the wrong offensive game plan for Cleveland. Let's just be real. Like they just picked the wrong one. Went into halftime, made adjustments, got McCaffrey involved, got DJ Moore a little bit more involved, started throwing it more vertical down the field instead of these little short passes that weren't going anywhere. And it opened up everything. So I feel as a Panther fan a little bit better about this than I would have if this happened last year. Because last year would have been they got up 20-0. Cleveland makes a comeback at the end. We kick a field goal, then they kick a field goal, and they win the game. And you're kind of left like, man, we lost that game. I don't really feel like that with this one. And I know they're going to see the Giants next week with Saquon Barkley. Apparently, he's rebirthed. So we'll find out real soon if the running defense of the Panthers that we saw get gashed by Cleveland yesterday, if that was just because it was Cleveland and they're the top rushing team in the league, or if there's a serious problem with our run defense.
Yeah, and I apologize earlier. I have two games mixed together. The Titans game, which I got to watch yesterday, was the 48-yard field goal that Bullock missed. Oh, I apologize, but getting confused there.
A lot of that yesterday. A lot of end of game field goal overtime. Like it felt like half the league was like down to the wire. It was
crazy. Colts, Texans, Bengals, Pittsburgh. But you know what? You mentioned a couple things. First of all, we'll talk about next week in a minute, but I got to watch Barkley yesterday. I'll tell you what, if that guy can stay healthy, he is an unbelievable athlete. So don't think Carolina fans, you're playing the Giants that it's some easy game. But the couple of things yesterday, you got to see the rebirth of Robbie Anderson. But I don't want to get excited for Carolina fans because I believe in the first game of Sam Darnold's era, we saw the same exact thing last year, a long touchdown pass as well. But, this is supposed to be a top defensive team, Desmond. This was not a top defensive team yesterday from what I've seen. I mean, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt looked like they were running at will in that game. And, it really put, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, it didn't put any pressure when you're running like that and you have an inexperienced quarterback. Say somewhat experienced, Jacoby Brissett, you take all the pressure off the quarterback to put him on himself when that running game was just like it was yesterday.
Yeah, there was time. Well, actually, it got to a point where it was kind of comical where it was like the Panthers knew this going into it. Phil Snow said it in his press conference earlier in the week. Nick Chubb is not the type of running back you can bring down by yourself, and you got to kind of gang tackle him all game. And I can't count how many times where yesterday, the first Panther defender that got to Nick Chubb would just bounce off of him, like literally probably 8 or 9 different times. There would be a guy around Nick Chubb's ankles or trying to square him up in the backfield, and he just bounces right off of Nick Chubb, and Nick Chubb keeps going forward, and it takes 3 or 4 guys to bring him down. That was all day. That's probably pretty demoralizing as a defense to see one dude just kind of slicing through you like that. But again, Panther fans need to kind of temper it a little bit because I'm seeing fire Matt Rule and all this stuff already. I actually saw improvement. Even though we lost the game, I saw improvement over what we've seen the past 2 years. They got to remember Cleveland was the number 1 rushing offense in the entire NFL last year. They have one of the best offensive lines in football. They've got one of the best running back rooms in football. They were going to be even with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, as long as he wasn't, like you just said, wasn't put in a position to have to win a game for them, they were going to be okay. So it wasn't like the Browns were going to be a pushover, and they never made it where Jacoby Brissett had to go win the game for them. Even in the end, on that drive at the end, we kind of gave them caveats where he only had to go 40 yards. And then, the refs gave him 15 of it. So it's like Brisket only had to go 25 yards to get his guy in field goal position to win a football game on the road. I feel like this team, Carolina, will see when they look at the box score and say, okay, Christian McCaffrey, only 10 carries for 33 yards. That needs to change. DJ Moore, only 3 receptions for 26 yards. That needs to change. Christian McCaffrey, only 4 catches for 24 yards. Those are your 2 best offensive players. Like, you've got to start scheming this to get this in their hands instead of worrying about spreading the ball out and getting it to all these different players and all this stuff. How about we use the guy we just gave $60 million to, and Christian McCaffrey, that we've had bubble wrapped for the whole preseason just to get to this moment? What are you saving him for? Like, stop trying to give it to Donta Freeman and Chuba Hubbard and all these guys. You give it to them when he's tired. You don't bring them in. You keep him in there and let him do what he does. You've got a potential MVP guy in your locker room, and you intentionally ignored him for a whole half to try to prove a point that you've got other pieces, and it cost you a football game.
Yes,
I don't think it'll happen next week. I don't expect it to happen next week in the Meadowlands.
You talk about Ike Ekwonu. I mean, what a tough first test he had to get in game 1 of his NFL career versus Myles Garrett. All you heard during the offseason is this offensive line is better. This offensive line is better. This offensive line is better. Just a small snapshot, game 1. What was your observation of that offensive line?
Well, I think McAdoo's play calling kind of exposed the weakness of the offensive line. Like, really, Ike's strength in college wasn't pass protection, it was run blocking. And if you look at the guys that are on this offensive line, Taylor Moton, Bradley Bozeman, who came from the Baltimore Ravens, who are known to run the football. He didn't start, or Austin Corbett. I can't remember. I think it was Pat Elflein that was starting at center, which we could have told you that wasn't going to work because he was starting last year. And that's the reason why the offensive line wasn't very good. They made a mistake not starting Bozeman. I'm sorry, Bozeman is the center, so he wasn't even starting. Corbett from the Rams is on that unit. And it felt like they didn't do the offensive line any favors by trying to throw the ball so much in the beginning. That's the frustrating thing to me. We weren't really down more than a score or 2 in this game at any given point, yet they panicked in the first half, or this was the play design, to keep throwing the football. And they kept trying to throw these short passes that just weren't moving the chains. And Cleveland, with their run game, was able to keep us off the field for a long period of time too. So all that kind of developed to a perfect storm. I say all that because I'm not really that concerned about what I saw. I saw a lot of positives, but I didn't see things like I saw last year where I'm like, oh, that's something that can't be fixed until the offseason. Like, whatever happened, oh, they ain't gonna be able to fix that until they get to the draft and free agency and all that kind of stuff. The stuff I saw yesterday can be fixed Tuesday in practice. Like, one of the touchdowns that Cleveland got early, their first touchdown, matter of fact, was off of a pass interference from C.J. Henderson, where literally Jacoby Brissett floated the ball up in the air like 60 yards. If CJ just turns around, the ball's going to hit him. Or Xavier Woods, which is what happened, intercepted the ball. If he had just turned around instead of trying to tackle the dude out of panic, instead of the ball getting placed on the 1 yard line and them running it in for the first score, we have an interception. Like, it's a completely different ball game. We flip the field and everything else. So stuff like that doesn't need to happen. Ekwonu is probably not going to face another pass rusher as talented as Myles Garrett ever again, like, in his life. So, like, he's got that out the way.
It all gets easier from here.
It should get easier from here. I can't think of another pass rusher he's going to see. Maybe like Cam Jordan or somebody from the Saints, but even that, I would say Garrett's better. Like, Garrett's probably a top 5 player in the league, and you got thrown in the deep end week 1. So, I'm hopeful that Baker isn't too sore today because he did get sacked 4 times, and I think Miles was most of those. But I think they'll adjust. I really feel like they'll adjust here. If they're true to what they say, they want to be a run first team. Run the ball first. Like, I don't even remember them running the ball on first down in the first half at all. They started to in the second half, and you see the results. So we'll see if they've learned from their mistakes, because the Matt Rule teams the first year or two never learned from their mistakes. They just kept doing them. With having pro coaches on the staff now, I feel like that's there. Although I will say this, if this Panther team starts out really bad, there's a reason why there are coaches on this assistant staff that have head coaching experience,
Yep.
whether it's Ben McAdoo or Steve Wilkes, the defensive backs coach that was coaching Arizona before they let him go and brought in Cliff Kingsbury. Those guys have been put in there in case they do need to let Matt Rule go in the middle of the season.
Absolutely.
They've got somebody that's got head coach experience that can just step right in and take over. If they start off like 1-5 or something like that, I wouldn't be surprised if Matt Rule gets let go and Ben McAdoo's the interim head coach the rest of the year. Like, keep an eye on that kind of thing. But I'm not ready to jump off the ledge yet. It's week 1. We lost on a 58-yard field goal at the end. Like, that's
they deserve the
you know what I mean? Like, it's just I can't be too upset about that.
Now, a couple more questions. We'll let you run, Desmond. First of all, you saw two sides of Baker Mayfield yesterday. The one that says I need to get into rhythm, you get to know my players, get the experience, which we can talk another day about what preseason should and shouldn't be for a lot of these teams in the NFL. But what was your overall assessment of Baker in game 1 as a Panther?
I was fine with him. The first half, I felt more like he was under so much duress from the Cleveland defense. Because let's be real, the Cleveland defense had been lathered up for a couple of months already for this game, based off of just perceived slights. The whole thing with the reporter Sam Baker said we're gonna F them up,
Right.
but he never really said it, that kind of thing. Although to be honest, he probably did say it. It just wasn't supposed to go out, and she put it out there. His team put together these T-shirts or whatever. The Browns players mentioned this stuff in the post game that they were kind of worked up on some of the stuff that happened to this game. That kind of worked against Carolina. Between that and the game plan they had in place, it just was a perfect storm for the Browns. I do like that they made adjustments and got it more into what Baker's game actually is, because Baker isn't like a dink and dunk kind of quarterback. He's a vertical, throw the ball down the field kind of guy, roll him out left, roll him out right, and let him chuck it. And that's how they got that 70-plus yard bomb to Robbie Anderson with him wide open down the middle of the field. I think back to some of the vertical plays they had yesterday, and it was basically letting Baker kind of move around a little bit in the pocket and find a guy. When they weren't doing that and they were trying to keep him in the pocket, what was happening? The balls were getting batted down. He was being incomplete. He was a little behind receivers. It just looked like they were trying to be too cute in the first half. Like they were trying to show Baker Mayfield off. And that, hey, we got all these other things too. Second half, it was like, okay, we have DJ Moore. We have Christian McCaffrey. This is Baker's strength. Let's start doing this instead of doing stuff we know isn't going to work. And that's the thing I'm more encouraged about, that they actually made adjustments, and those adjustments worked. They just, in the end, they didn't account for the refs. They didn't account for the kicker kicking it out of bounds. They didn't account for a minute left on the clock. They just, all that together is just, in the end, is what happened. So I still feel okay about the Panthers. I'm still sticking to my 11-7 prediction, although I have this as one of the wins. So they got to go fishing for a win now.
Well, and let's talk real quickly before we let you run about next week's game. I got to watch the Giants yesterday. If the Panthers are going to win, and I'm going to let you piggyback on me after these comments, they're going to have to come out and start the game like they started the second half of yesterday's game. And I'll tell you why. Very similar team here in the Giants. They ran the ball. Barkley was 164 yards yesterday by himself. The team rushed for over 200 yards versus the Titans, which is considered, like the Panthers, one of the better teams in the NFL. That's number one. What happens when you run? We talked about Chubb running and how successful Brissett was when the running game works. Well, how about Daniel Jones, who's not the greatest quarterback in the NFL, but when you have a running game that is running, it opens up so much more. Daniel Jones, 17 of 21, 188 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did throw an early pick, but it goes to show you it doesn't matter who your quarterback is. A great running game can make them look that much better. For the Panthers, now, good thing is that Daniel Jones was sacked 5 times by the Titans. Probably the only part of the Titans defense that played them well was their edge rushes yesterday. The rest of it was kaput. So My question to you is, knowing this, you're a similar team. Do you agree with me that if they can start the game out using McCaffrey, using DJ Moore, doing the things that Baker does well that they did in the second half, there's no game easy. The Giants are tough. I'm going to tell you, I saw that yesterday. But I still think the Panthers could win this game convincingly if they start the game off the way they started that second half off.
It's real easy. The formula is real simple. Feed Christian McCaffrey.
Yep.
At the end of this game. You gave him an extension for a reason. He's like the third highest running back in the league right now. He was the number one when he signed the deal. You've had him in bubble wrap for a year or so. He could have came back at the end of last year, but they kept him out because they were out of playoff contention. Play Christian McCaffrey, run some play action to get DJ Moore involved in this, and use your strength. You brought in Donta Foreman, you had Chuba Hubbard. You've got a running back room. Why are you ignoring the run? Like, I can't understand this fascination with the pass in today's NFL. I get it. It's more fun. Chicks dig the 70-yard pass, that kind of thing.
Right.
But the good teams run the football. Like, the great teams run the football really well, and they know how to stop the run too. And that's never going to change, whether it's 2022, 1992, 1972. The teams that have been the best in all those eras are the ones that can run the football and can stop the run. And if Carolina just worries about those two things, the rest of the stuff will fall into place. The two things they had problems with yesterday was they couldn't stop Nick Chubb, so they couldn't stop the run, and they didn't even try to run the football until the second half. Like 54 yards for Carolina Panthers offense is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Rushing, just unacceptable. Like, we can't have that happen. We had a stretch a couple years ago where we hadn't allowed a 100-yard rusher in like 2 years or something like that. And I miss those days. I miss the days where you had a nose tackle that was like the center of that line, and you couldn't run through it. And if you got close to 100 yards on the Panthers, it was an accomplishment. Right now, everybody's taking turns. So it's like, stop the run, get McCaffrey involved early, get Baker comfortable early. Don't put the whole thing on Baker Mayfield in the beginning of the game. Put it on your star. Put it on McCaffrey. Put it in his hands. Do some stuff to get him in space. Get him work. Then that, like you said, opens up everything else. And this should be a little bit easier for them to do. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for week-to-week adjustments at this point. I want to see them adjust from what they saw in week 1 and adjust accordingly for week 2. The schedule's still the schedule. So, I mean, all the preseason strength of schedule, how hard is the schedule going to be type stuff, you really don't know until you start playing the games, because all these teams are different from the year before. So
it's like anything else. Yeah. You don't know until you play the games. But let me tell you, last thing here, the Carolina fans that are watching this show, let's remember this team last year started 3-0, and the city was ready to throw a parade last year after the third game. 0-1, it's not where you want to be. But I'll tell you what, even though they did not play their best game yesterday, I saw a lot of things that were a lot better than the end of the year last year.
Panther fans, keep this in mind before Larry lets me go. The Green Bay Packers lost their opening game by a lot last year and then rattled off 7 straight wins. Like, it's not the end of the world. And if anything, if you're a Panther fan and you've watched the Matt Rule regime, you should feel a little encouraged about what you saw in the second half, because, again, they actually made adjustments and the adjustments work. So they're actually doing what they're supposed to do. Yesterday was just one of those, tempt the fates type of games. And, dude hit a 58-yarder. Well,
you're going to lose some of those throughout the year, no matter how good or how bad you are.
Yep, you're right.
All right. Well, listen, buddy, I wanted to thank you so very, very much taking time out of, I know you're busy Monday, to be on Frankly Speaking Sports this evening.
Hey, man, anytime you need me, I'm a phone call or a text away. Just let me know.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Stay safe.
Appreciate it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the great Desmond Johnson, owner of Tobacco Road Sports Radio, co-host Believe in Carolina Panthers podcast, and Sports Illustrated contributor.